From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio.
Hello, welcome back to the show. My name is Matt.
My name is Noel.
They call me Ben. We're joined as always with our super producer Max the Freight Train Williams. Most importantly, you are here. That makes this the stuff they don't want you to know. Fellow conspiracy realists, tonight's episode is not pleasant. There's no two ways about it. It's a natural follow-up to some of the previous explorations we've had on the nature of the internet, technology, and online communication. We've talked about this at length in the past. Base human tendencies tend to drive innovation. I mean, war, for example, almost always leads to tremendous scientific breakthroughs. But one thing we don't talk about as often is how it's a reciprocal relationship. You know, technology also exacerbates and affects those natural human tendencies. I mean, some scientific breakthroughs also lead to war. It is very much a two-way street. We could say this about any tendency, including the human drive for reproduction, for lust. From the early days of film to the rivalry of VHS and Betamax, sex has always been a great decider of technology. Do you guys remember hearing about the Betamax VHS thing?
Oh, I mean, yeah, I guess just in terms of like the battle for supremacy of format?
Yeah, it was ultimately the adult entertainment industry that decided that. Ultimately, the reason VHS tapes ascended, or VHS technology, was because it was that format the industry chose. And we're exploring a very dark and disturbing aspect of technology and sex. We need to say at the very top, this is important information. It is quite disturbing. This is not for everybody. Tonight's show contains descriptions of sexual material and abuse. However, we believe it is mission critical. And as always, there is stuff they don't want you to know.
Absolutely. We're just going to let's do it this way. This episode is about porn. If you do not want to listen to an episode about porn, turn this one off. If you've got kids in the car,
PG-13 plus.
Just, if this episode is just like rolling as you're listening, or, you're just continually playing episodes, this is the one. So turn it off if you don't want to listen to information about porn.
Here are the facts. The internet and sex have always been intertwined, kind of like lovers, you could say. You could check out our Dead Internet Theory episode for more on the origin of the modern internet. You can get real deep in the weeds if you go to our pal Jonathan Strickland's show, Tech Stuff. But for our purposes today, we need to realize that at the beginning of the World Wide Web, very few people outside of maybe the military-industrial complex and the tech world and academia, very few John and Jane Q. Public types realized how big this would be, that it would be an information revolution that would make it possible for a single person or group or government to communicate with billions of other entities near instantly. They also may not have realized it would become one of the horniest inventions in human history, but sex was an inherent piece of the equation early on. There's a person that we're leaning on a lot in tonight's exploration. Fantastic author and journalist Samantha Cole wrote a book called How Sex Changed the Internet and the Internet Changed Sex, an Unexpected History. Cole delves into this narrative that I think is tacitly acknowledged, but not widely expressed. And maybe this is how we get into it. I was not aware of this. Cole found through intense research that the first form of quote unquote pornography shared online was likely the equivalent of typing 80085 on a calculator.
Yeah. Boobs. Yeah. Sorry.
Well, yeah, but you can create pretty complex images with ASCII. It's just all the different characters that you can potentially type with a keyboard into a machine, and you can create pictures.
Yeah, by spacing things out and, distributing various characters in rows and columns, over the course of a giant kind of block of this text. And honestly, it's kind of come back in a sort of, retro internet kind of way. The internet loves to throw back, and you see these in meme form or in like text form. People will text you these things sometimes. I've definitely seen a resurgence in sort of horny ASCII art. Of late.
Ask her, yeah. And this is a great point, because if we think about it like digital graffiti, how some of the first written scripts or runes were things like Vugnar was here, then we see this pursuing the same kind of process. It only grew, as you said, Matt, in complexity over time. And Samantha Cole also points out that sex or that human impulse continues to drive innovation on the internet. And so it might surprise, I almost said some of us, but it might surprise no one to learn that some of the biggest, most popular sites in the world today are straight up pornography. And Pornhub, by the way, is one of the number one things. I guess it's old for the internet now, but in the grand scheme of things, it's very recent. It was launched on May 25th, 2007 by a web developer and foosball legend, by the way, named Matt Keyser. He created it as a website within a larger company called Interhub. And there's a lot more history there, but the guys who founded the site Brazzers, which is kind of a pun once you get into the weeds, it's like pronouncing brothers with an accent, but they met via foosball, which I was not aware of. And you don't usually think of it.
Foosball.
Yeah.
Is there a certain form of nominative determinism in the name Keyser? It sure is close to skeezy. I don't know. It's neither here nor there. But yeah, I mean, maybe this individual didn't have a full vision of where this would go and was just trying to make a quick buck. But it certainly evolved or devolved, should we say, into something entirely monstrous, one could argue.
Yeah, I am tempted to agree with you there, Noel, because we could ask if Keyser was simply doing something that history would prove inevitable, right? YouTube came to the forefront, or YouTube launched in 2005, and if you take the larger view of history, it seems statistically certain that a sex-centric version of YouTube would follow, and that's what Pornhub was. Viewers would find adult content from a growing list of categories, right? These categories are based on any number of things. And then in another like YouTube mimicry situation, you could, as a user, choose to upload and share your own videos.
Yeah. So let's go back a little bit just to consider some of the most popular websites for pornography prior to this tubing, if you will. They were pay-for sites, many of them, where you would watch videos that were created and uploaded by someone who was a porn producer, right? Whether that's on the very high end or the very low end in all the various categories.
And everything in between.
Yes. There were also a lot of free sites you could go to that you would find a lot of the same content, but just in a free way or an older version of the same content that had been around for a long time, but you could access it for free now.
And just to say, too, like prior to this, access to pornographic materials was pretty much limited to magazines that would be tucked away in a very specific siloed room in either magazine shops or bookshops or video shops or whatever. And there'd be cameras on it and like a whole little secret skeezy kind of door that you had to go through, and stores or online retailers that would sell DVDs from companies like, I guess, Vivid maybe, or different ones. Wicked, I think, was a really popular one. But I don't know if you guys were aware of this, but I mean, those DVDs were really, really, really expensive, like $60, $70 sometimes. So this is sort of like a great democratization of pornographic material. And you got to also wonder what those publishers felt about their very pricey intellectual property getting uploaded to these tube sites for free.
They hated it. Yeah.
Yeah.
New York Magazine has a great piece on this from 2011 by a journalist named Ben Wallace. And Wallace walks through this like, you would also find VHS tapes before you would find like the DVDs, right? And
yes.
So that move from physical media to online accessibility, at first, it started, per Wallace, it started with the idea that it was relatively simple to build a website and people would put up a web page that linked to other adult websites. And if you clicked on it, you would get thumbnails at first, right?
And a computer virus.
You would get thumbnails and a computer virus. Yeah. And these sites still had the Achilles heel of online content, which is that they relied on ad revenue to make a profit. And then it evolved, as we're saying, very quickly it evolved to video content. In the summer of 2006 alone, 3 different sites launched things that would become kind of a triumvirate for a time of streaming pornography: PornoTube, RedTube, and YouPorn. And they were flooded with free content. A lot, to your point, Noel, a lot of the content on there was sometimes legally licensed for a very small amount of money, because the old school production companies like Vivid Entertainment, for instance, did not recognize how big the web would become. And then a lot more of it was pirated from those paid sites, those paywalled sites. And they just started saying, okay, we're going to make our money by keeping users on the sites and clicking through banner ads, which is something that continues today. I mean, please check out Samantha Cole's book if you want to learn more. It is probably one of the best works on this evolution of the internet and sex.
And I was just going to add, like, now, I mean, there's so many mechanisms like that are kind of codified for getting stuff taken down, or filters, or like bots that scan for, owned intellectual property, and, will automatically pull things down or temporarily pull things down until the poster can prove that they have the rights to the material. But back in these days, it was the Wild West, man. And especially some of these less internet savvy companies, they probably didn't even know the stuff was out there. They didn't even know they were having their lunch eaten by these new companies, right?
Quite possibly. In New York Magazine, just to put this part in, New York Magazine, the reason that Wallace article is important is because it depicts exactly what Noel was describing earlier, which is the previous models of distribution of pornography. We're at AVN, the Adult Video, the Adult Industry Awards. They were at AVN, and there were a lot of protests about what was happening. And they were saying people are stealing our work. So they identified this early on, but a few years too late.
I want to make some point here. I don't know if I can do it correctly, but let's just go here. Imagine the different specialized, I was going to say kinks, but the things that people are into, right?
Genres, let's say, perhaps, I don't know.
Just to make a point about what we were saying at the top, Ben, about how the internet really changed the way this stuff functions. Because if you were back in the day interested in a specific thing, you would have to find that specific thing. And you would go on a hunt, and it would not be easy to find, let's just say like bondage or something like that, right? You would have to go to a very specialized place probably to even find that content, like physical place to find that content. And then the way the internet changed that is they started using like meta tags, right? And stuff for search, and revolutionized search. The stuff that you use now with Google or with, DuckDuckGo or whatever you search for, a lot of that was revolutionized through some of these sites in making these very distinct categories and tagging every piece of content and just making it a robust system rather than just a simple search for a couple keywords that are in, a title somewhere. Like just putting that stuff deep within the content.
Yeah. And there's an argument that could be made, sometimes perhaps by more conservative forces, that in doing that, in surfacing the availability or surfacing the prominence of that, that these systems, and we'll get into the data mining later, that these systems have radicalized or pushed people toward things that they may not have normally engaged in or even knew about, especially when we're considering underage users of the internet. But the real trippy thing, and we were talking about this a bit off air, is when you go to, and no judgment, folks, if you go to free pornography sites that you would just visit on the internet very easily, with a search engine of your choice, you will see what appears to be a panoply of distinct brands and entities. But it is exactly like how when you walk through a grocery store, you'll see all these products advertised like there are a million different varieties of cereal, right? They appear to be separate, but in reality, the monopolization is still occurring. It occurs in every profitable industry. Just like how one or two companies will own most of the cereal, one or two companies own most of those seemingly autonomous pornography sites. There's one company in particular that we're going to talk about, and that company, folks, has been party to some very evil things.
And all they want to do is keep you on their sites forever.
Evil things. And we're going to pause for a word from our sponsor. Here's where it gets crazy. Back to Pornhub, one of the most popular adult content sites out there. As of February of this year that we're recording, 2024, it is the 13th most visited website on the planet. And it makes me recall our earlier conversation about the dead internet theory. I think it was you, Noel, who said most people don't go to like destination websites. Things like Pornhub are the exception, but it's only one facet of a much, much larger enterprise. And it's a twisted tale to figure out who owns Pornhub.
It's interesting too, because at its heart, Pornhub is an aggregator. But it's gotten to the point where it's so powerful that it's kind of aggregating all its own stuff, right? Under the guise of different genres and labels and brands. But it's like, the idea of GE owning all of the TV networks, or NBC at the very least, and you don't really think about that because you're thinking, oh, I'm watching this network, and it's got its own distinct identity. But really the hand inside the puppet has always been GE.
Yeah, I think that's a good comparison. We know just to get into this part with the ownership, three-card Monty, the Matryoshka doll structure of ownership here. After Matt Keiser and his foosball friends made Pornhub, the parent company Interhub was purchased by a German national named Fabian Thielmann, who, when he purchased it, became part of what's called the Manwin conglomerate, which was once called MindGeek. This reminds me of Blackwater, like how Blackwater became XE, became Academi, or whatever the order is.
Well, it was called MindGeek until very recently.
Mm-hmm. And now it's known as AYLO, AYLO. And we will get to AYLO is still not the top of the chain. We'll get to the real owner in this episode. The real owner is not Fabian. He was arrested for tax evasion at the end of 2012. At that point, he was making an estimated $100 million US per year from this empire. He paid a pretty hefty fine. And then he got a suspended sentence, but he sold his stake in the company in 2013. And this is, also, I think he was a programmer as well. This is why it's different from some of these studios of old, because to your earlier point that you made, Matt, these sites have always taken a data intensive approach. That's how they weaponize, you could say they weaponize algorithms to monitor everything about a user's interaction, right? Even if you think that incognito browser can save you, sorry.
Can we just really quickly acknowledge that the name change from Mind Geek to Are You Joking? Manwin is for a porn empire is a little comical. I mean, I don't think that's necessarily what the word is intended, but the pun is inescapable. Manwin. I mean,
oh, geez. They own a lot of things. They also, I was surprised to find that by 2009, the company now going by ILO, they had an estimated 100 million unique viewers in their 3 largest sites alone. For comparison, that's slightly less than 1/3 of the entire population of the United States. Any other web company would kill for that, would literally murder for that.
Yeah, and let's get into that data just a little bit more here, because think about all of the social media companies that have algorithms that try and suggest things to you based on what you've watched in the past, how long you've watched those things, if you interact and comment, if you like, if you share. That, all of that stuff, all of those actions and the tracking of you as a person all goes back to this industry. Because again, all they wanted to do is keep you on their site. So they needed to know exactly what you like and what you click on and all of the terms associated with the content you're watching. And it all goes back to this.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. And to what degree was ALOS, like YouTube, responsible for content uploaded to these sites? That's one of the big questions. Are they functioning as just a public stomping ground? Do they bear any responsibility for what people are saying in that digital space? Also, who actually owned or owns it? We'll get to it, but naturally, there were industry concerns about piracy, which we mentioned earlier. But again, folks, here is the third disclaimer for this episode. This is the deep water. This is the disturbing stuff. You can turn back now. All right. The worst stuff, there are worse things on there than piracy. There are non-consensual videos from hidden cameras, dressing rooms and department stores.
Or shoots that were arranged and agreed upon
to look like that
in some form or fashion, but then things go differently. There's so
like
many
girls
stories.
Do porn. Yeah.
Well, but there are also, because that is sort of a kink. There are also a lot of videos that just mimic that, make the production look as though that's what you're seeing. But I'm not apologizing for any of it. No, there are shoots that mimic that style, but it is consensual and it is a production. But then there is also the real deal.
It makes it almost impossible to know the difference between
exactly
one
right.
that is made up to be that way and one that is actually that way.
Yes.
And then
100%.
How does the casual user know the difference? And to continue down the litany of unclean things, there's also revenge pornography, which is non-consensual. Revenge pornography is when someone, in an attempt to besmirch or humiliate or harass another person, they post sexually compromising content of that person without their consent. There's also documentation of sexual assault up to and including rape, depictions of child sexual abuse material. Please don't call it child pornography, folks. This quickly becomes an enormous issue. Multiple journalists, found intensely disturbing proof that the company, the ultimate owner company, used various outlets, including Pornhub, to profit from what very much was non-consensual content, including sex trafficking. Samantha Cole, before she wrote the fantastic book we mentioned earlier, she wrote several articles for Vice and concluded in her investigations that Pornhub in particular profited from, quote, content that has destroyed lives and continues to do harm. Unfortunately, this was not just a single tragic example. There are numerous examples of this, as well as numerous lawsuits.
Right. And in January of 2021, there was a class action lawsuit that was filed in Montreal calling for anyone who had pornographic photos or videos of them shared on Pornhub since 2007 to come forward and, be a party to this class.
And then there was another infamous series of cases that involved what were called Pornhub content partners, meaning there was an outside company that may have their own website, but also widely distributed their content on these aggregators, like you were saying, Noel. And one of the most infamous is an outfit called Girls Do Porn. It was a nasty, terrifying story of assault, sex trafficking, horrific exploitation. They would fly their victims out and essentially take them to the middle of nowhere, pressure them into agreeing to have sex acts recorded, and then they would lie to them actively about how they would say, okay, well, this video is only going to be distributed overseas to private collectors in places like Australia or New Zealand. And in every single case, this was a premeditated falsehood. The producers, everyone involved except the victims, knew they were lying. And they would later take this content that they had filmed and they would put it up on their own website, the Girls Do Porn website, and then they would put it on these other hubs like Pornhub, and millions of people would see this. The victims were getting doxxed in the comments, identified by their full name, their location, etc. They were harassed at their jobs and their schools. Multiple women said the harassment reached a point where they contemplated suicide. Their lives were ruined. And when they were taken to those rooms, that does count as trafficking, when they were coerced into these acts.
Well, the pornography industry, if anyone's, followed the history of it or seen films like Boogie Nights, for example, certainly no stranger to acts of coercion, having underage people, maybe runaways, taking advantage of people who are maybe on the skids. But at the very least, it did evolve into, despite all of these problems and the problematic, origins of the industry, there was more agency in those days where at least, you got paid. It was a form of sex work that was legal, and you technically had protections and you had a way to earn an income and you were making this choice. With this advent of this kind of stuff, it's like you're adding all of the worst parts of the internet, the piracy, the removing that agency, and just absolutely victimizing individuals in a much more egregious, one could argue, way than what the video porn industry was like in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah. And just to get into some of this coercion and just how awful this is, I want to give a quick example here from the New Yorker's piece, The Fight to Hold Pornhub Accountable. It was written June 13th, 2022. This is a little excerpt from the article. It's about a woman named Rachel who was a child when she began to be coerced by some unknown person that had a lot of personal information about her and convinced her that for her own safety, she had to start taking pictures of herself and videos of herself doing things. She was 15 years old when this started happening. I'm gonna just read a bit of this, guys.
And this is by Sheila Kolhatakar.
Yeah, that's correct. Says Rachel stopped sleeping and spent her days and nights searching for the videos. At this point, videos of her that she was taking and sending to whoever this person was, they've showed up on Pornhub, and then they start going wide everywhere to all the porn sites, and she cannot take them down. So she's trying to figure it out. So here it is. She's spending her days and nights searching for these videos, filling out dozens of removal requests, saying things like, quote, "Hi, I'm underage, and I had many videos and photos posted of me on here." This is in December 2018, writing to Pornhub. "They keep getting re-uploaded onto this site. I'm only 15 in them, and I don't have the links. I don't know what to do because every time I get them removed, you keep allowing them to be uploaded, and it's ruining my life." Pornhub responded to her, asked for a link to each video, the username of the accounts that were used to upload it, the title of the video, and the file, the screenshots of the page. Rachel went through and would spend, like on a nightly routine, send all of this information every time she could find one, trying to get them taken down. But then videos would sometimes get taken down, but not often, but they would be uploaded in just a modified clip. So it's not the same content that can be tracked and deleted again, right?
So the scraper can't find it.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is the same strategy used in YouTube piracy.
That's right.
But somebody out there at this time is just doing it. Is just continually trying to get this content online and profiting from it.
Or it's become popular content at this point. And
yes.
So maybe it's being uploaded by others who have, you know what I mean? Right. That then it's the things that are being asked of this young woman, impossible. These are impossible to do. And you're basically putting the burden on the victim. You know?
Yeah. Which is a very American strategy with business. But this is, as we'll find, this is not an American-based company. But there's also, I'm glad you pointed out that article in the New Yorker, which we'll go back to as well, because it is a must-read piece. We see here a very dark version of what is sometimes colloquially referred to as the Streisand effect, right? And this continues. To go back to the Girls Do Porn owners in 2019, they were found guilty of intimidating and coercing 22 women into having sex on camera and lying to them. In December of 2020, 40 victims filed a lawsuit against MindGeek for a cavalcade of accusations, including, they said, you knew that your content partners were up to these evil things and you failed to moderate the content circulating rampantly. Unfortunately, that child's story is not unique. The lawsuit expanded to include 50 plaintiffs. It demanded more than $40 million in damages, as well, in addition to the money that ALO or MindGeek at the time earned from hosting and promoting those videos. And October of 2021, those victims reached a settlement with the parent company. And the company reacted. They said they no longer post content without first passing it through human and automated moderation. They also said if you flag a video, it is automatically disabled until there's a review. And they said since 2020, we've begun requiring users who upload content to provide a government-issued ID in order to be an uploader. However, there are more and more examples that seem, first off, that is nice in theory, but is it actually deployed in practice? And then secondly, the removal is not as clear-cut as it should be. I mean, this takes us to another underage case. I'd like us to also consider the case of Rose Kalemba, who was assaulted by a group of men, habitual sexual predators, when she was only 14 years old. These men, who very much were premeditated, they threatened to murder her if she told anybody about this harrowing assault. And then they also, this is per her own description, they took out a laptop and showed her videos that they had taken of attacks on other victims. Fast forward, she survives. And by the way, the first law enforcement officer she speaks with, when she's been stabbed and beaten and repeatedly assaulted, the first law enforcement officer asked her if it started as a consensual interaction.
Give me a break.
I know. And a few months later, she survives, thankfully. She is browsing MySpace. She finds people from her school, classmates, sharing a link and tagging her in it. And when she clicks on it, she's directed to Pornhub. You can read a full interview with her speaking with the British Broadcasting Service, where she recalls the title. And it's important to hear it. Her quote in her own words: the titles of the videos were things like teen crying and getting slapped around, teen getting destroyed, or passed out teen. One of them had over 400,000 views.
And I have to say, like, as a parent, it's been a little bit of almost a culture shock to realize how much my kid is aware of and at 15 and how much, kids in their cohort are aware of. And I mean, it makes sense. It's maybe me having fooled myself into thinking that my kid was still like innocent. My kid's a good kid, not a bully, but is bullied. And there is this kind of bullying, and 13, 14, 15-year-olds can be really, really cruel and horrible and mean and share this kind of stuff without thinking about who's being victimized here and just treating it as a way of like punking somebody on the internet, you know, as opposed to realizing that this person is who is of my same age needs help. And instead we're using this as an opportunity to humiliate them. That is real. And it's terrifying. And I'm, you know, again, not saying I'm so special. My kid is not someone who would ever do that, but there are definitely people in that age group that to this day would still do something like that.
It's horrible. Guys, should we talk about some of the, I don't know, there's another dark side to it here where it's an individual who makes the decision to try and make some money with their body because they can, and they're pretty desperate, and they need income, so they try to become, let's say, a lingerie model or something like that for an extra 200, 300 pounds or whatever. If you're, I'm thinking of a specific case in London where, you know, I need to make rent and I need to help. I need to make sure my kid has food and all this stuff. So I'm going to do this. And the thing that can occur, I'm going to read from, well, I'm not going to read from it, but I'm going to reference an article that's on this website called Exodus Cry, EXODUSCRY.com. It is an American Christian-based nonprofit organization that's got some pretty like interesting ideas about like ending porn pretty much and all sex trafficking. And it's kind of cool, but it's also, I don't know. It just depends, right? Depending on how you feel about some of the stuff, it's a little out there, but they allow for individuals to give their story. This is how I ended up in a porn video. And there's one you can find right now. It's called I Was Trafficked into the Porn Industry as a Desperate Single Mom. And it just goes through the process that can occur where you begin down this road and you're able to make some extra income, right? And it's good. But the quote producers of this stuff exploit an individual because as this person says, there's always another person who's willing to do it if you aren't willing to do it. So you won't get paid and you won't make rent this month or whatever if you don't do this increasingly more intense or maybe horrific thing on camera for us.
Like the Order of Nine Angles, the kind of coercion.
Exactly. And she describes a moment where she goes to set. She doesn't know what the scene is going to be. And then she is told what the scene is going to be. She is given drugs and alcohol so that she can, quote, get through it. And it ends up being 25 individual males that she has to have sex with on camera. And she passes out. It's horrible. It's a horrific experience. And she attempts to get out of it, but it's very difficult once you're inside this thing because these people, these individuals, these, again, producers and the people who work with them know who you are, know where you live, and it can be extremely scary and horrific. Even if you're doing it, even if you are choosing to do it.
Right, because you don't have informed consent if you don't know what you're agreeing to. And that's where that's one of the realms in which these predatory forces operate.
They're always moving the goalposts too, right?
Yeah.
You might agree to one thing, but then there's this inherent escalation that isn't under your control, and then you're manipulated by these individuals.
Right.
Dare we say threatened, you know?
Monsters always seek to erode agency.
Mm-hmm.
The rampant depictions of abuse continue. The Internet Watch Foundation, a great nonprofit, found 118 instances of child sexual abuse on just Pornhub, just one site of many owned by a single company. And that was only between 2017 and 2019. Again, this started 10 years before 2017. It continues today. And then there were reactions as this increasingly entered the public sphere. MasterCard and Visa, two big financial, like credit card companies, they suspended use of their cards on the site Pornhub in December 2020 in I'd like to go back to that June 2022 New Yorker article, which really brought this to the mind of the public more so. They had an investigation into the ongoing abuse. They interviewed several women, one of whom we mentioned, who discovered videos and pictures of themselves on Pornhub. They did not ever consent to sharing this material in several situations. They did not consent to being filmed. They did not even consent to the acts that occurred. These were crimes. These were criminal acts. And they would now, in the midst of surviving these horrific things, they would have to ask this website that was making money off the crimes to remove the material. And just a few days after that publication in the New Yorker, the CEO and COO of MindGeek resigned from their positions. I don't think we mentioned these guys earlier. Ferris Antoun, the CEO, and David Tassillo, the COO, that's Chief Executive and Chief Operations Officer. They also claimed the resignations were not due to this report in the New Yorker. And as far as we can tell, they remain shareholders today. So they are getting passive income off of these acts.
Of course they are. Yeah. And as we record this episode right now, and most likely as y'all are listening along at home across the globe, this type of abuse is ongoing. It continues, and depictions of it are going to find their way into various other parts of the internet. We know how difficult it is for legislation to stay in step with exponentially changing digital landscapes and technology. So, while there may be the best intentions of lawmakers to keep this stuff under wraps, just as soon as a law is passed, a loophole is found.
Yeah, it's like a sick game of whack-a-mole.
Whack-a-mole.
Played like against a hydra of old myth. You stop one monster, and then it seems two more spring up in its place because
stronger.
The internet wants stuff on it, right? It wants people to stay on it. It wants to create things. It's very easy to create a website. It's very easy to create or upload or distribute content. It is much, much more difficult to remove that, to scrub that. And this is something that is being leveraged by predators around the world. I mean, we're talking a little bit US centric, but to answer the question we asked a couple times at the beginning here, we have to travel outside of the U.S. to learn the true owners of Pornhub, which became MindGeek, which became ALO, which is owned by someone else today. I suggest we pause for a word from our sponsors. Okay, this is an evil version of that old Saturday Night Live cartoon about how few media companies actually control the media you see. Pornhub and its parent company, which owns so many things, we can even give you a full list.
They do that? Just quick, just to give some people.
Sure,
their premium pay sites include Brazzers, Reality Kings, Digital Playground, Twisties, Mofos, Men.com, Reality Dudes, and SeanCody.com. Their video sharing platforms include Pornhub, YouPorn, RedTube, and Tube8. They have marketplaces called My Dirty Hobby and Uvio, UVIO. They also have gaming and application companies, guys, called Nutaku, Nutaku. They also own 2 advertising networks that then work through all of those sites to sell those ads, right? There's Traffic Junkie and Adult Force, and that's just getting started.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Pornhub, which is, again, just one of the things owned by ALO, all of ALO, the entire umbrella of these corporate possessions is now owned by another company that most people haven't heard of. I think it's fair to say we had not heard of this until we began researching these crimes. That company's name is Ethical Capital Partners. They acquired ALO for an undisclosed sum in March of 2023. And what do we say about innocuous names?
Oh boy,
really, guys?
Yep.
Ethical.
And initially, ECP, which we'll call them for the sake of convenience, they refused to disclose their owners, their stakeholders. You can find the board, but they initially refused to say anything about this due to the stigma of their purchase, which happened after many of the lawsuits that we just described. Now you can go to their website. You can easily find a list of the management team online, but the management team is not necessarily the same thing as the profiteers, right? They are getting paid to be there, but they're not what we would call the majority stakeholders. To find the big fish in that one, we have to travel to Austria. Oh, it's confusing because Ethical Capital Partners is, and its various subsidiaries, they're based in Luxembourg, but the owner doesn't live in Luxembourg. Let's learn a little bit more about this guy.
Yeah, I just want to give a couple pieces of info here. ECP, that Ethical Capital Partners, announced that they, as you said, Ben, they announced that they acquired MindGeek back in March of 2023. So it is like right after all of the heat had just happened, right? So then this company called Ethical Capital Partners runs through to be like, hey, we got this, guys. We're going to make sure everything's good from now on. You know, and it sounds that way, right? It's the story that's being told here.
Certainly in the statement they released.
Quick question. Undisclosed amount that it was acquired for, right? Like, I would imagine that means it was a massive amount, but shouldn't there be a way to find things like that? The filings, like, can you do an acquisition like this and have it be a complete and utter mystery to the public? How much money exchanged hands?
It's a private company, man.
It's a private company. It also
That's
is
a good point.
Going across conventional geopolitical borders. So you can use whichever set of laws is most convenient to you. A microcosm of that is why so many companies in the U.S. are based in Delaware unreasonably, or maybe in the Caribbean, or other. I guess you can also see tax advantages being another thing weaponized. But the issue too is not just the international borders, right? Because the internet has rendered some of those borders irrelevant in legal terms or in actionable legal terms. The issue is also the many, many, many shell companies and proxies between the actual owner and the purported owners or the management or the infantry on the ground or the boardroom. The way it works, which I don't know if we have time to fully get into it, but the way these things work in general is you as a business tycoon, you don't directly purchase the thing you want to purchase. What you have instead are ideally, or is at least one, but ideally many more than one, different companies, and you have a controlling stake in those companies. You're a majority stakeholder in that, whether that's 51% or just like you are the single largest percentage shareholder. Then you have those companies get together, maybe even form another company or another group of shells, and you have them purchase the thing you want. And so in a way, you're paying a little bit of a vigorish to all those other stakeholders for that activity, right? And they're getting kickbacks, and then you are able to hide your hand. Now you are unseen, but the checks still arrive. The profit still arrives. And if you are not, dare I say, an ethical capital partner, then you have nothing to worry about until the law comes knocking. Does that seem like a reasonable explanation?
Well, what if you?
I think
yes.
So.
But what if you founded Ethical Capital Partners and your name is Rocco Miliambro? This is not somebody we were going to talk about, but this is one of the primary people at ECP, the company that acquired ILO/MindGeek. And this dude is one of Canada's biggest cannabis retailers. He has an empire that was just acquired by another, or I guess merged with another of the largest cannabis retailers. And it's very interesting if you look at this guy's investments, which include mining, like gold mining. Somebody like that just has all of these companies that go out and do these massive things the way you were describing it, Ben.
That's just called diversification, though, right? Isn't it? I mean, from the perspective of a business person. And isn't it interesting how those, like even things like cannabis, which are now legal, and these types of, I guess selling sex, whatever in whatever form we're talking about, on paper being legal, that once was sort of the realm of someone like a pimp or a drug lord, or someone in the Old West who maybe had a tavern that also ran gambling and games and prostitution. This is now something that is the realm of the legitimate businessman.
And these folks again are, I not to my horn, but I like it. I like the description of infantry on the ground in the boardroom. That's not necessarily the general. That's not necessarily the officer level, even though they're corporate officers. Let's travel over to Austria and meet the guy who was working so ardently for his identity to be obscured.
Oh, this is a weird one. There's a whole video you can find that Vice News produced in 2021 titled "Who is the Secret Owner of Pornhub?" It's a weird video because the people who made it kind of tracked this person down. This person named, well, I guess, should we give the name?
Oh, yeah.
Bernd, Bernd, Bergmair, Bergmair. This is one of the majority owners. This is a person who ran MindGeek for a long time. This is a very fascinating character who is extremely elusive. And this Vice News video finds him in London, of all places, by tracking down his girlfriend and her Instagram page, and then her, I think she had a blog or something, and that's how they found him. But this guy just kind of stays out of the limelight. The creators of that video from Vice News don't get any new information or anything. They just kind of track him down, which is honestly a bit weird.
Guys, I can't help. I mentioned the thing earlier about how, what once was in the realm of vice, lords or whatever, gambling and drugs and sex work and all of that is now kind of become in the realm of legitimate business. I can't help but see parallels with what you're describing, Matt, and this corporate structure of shell companies and all leading down to this one man, to the whole arrangement in the TV show Breaking Bad with Madrigal and the giant web of German run corporations that are diverse, and for everything from fast food to whatever else it might be, and also hiding in there in between the lines is a meth empire. And I'm not saying what Pornhub is doing is that, but they are breaking the law, and it all is kind of, whether at the behest, but at the very least under a structure governed by quote unquote legitimate business people.
Yeah, you're right. People who have intense investment across the board. I don't. It's very weird. And again, if you look at Ethical Capital Partners' website, they specifically say we focus on investment with companies and in sectors that require extreme ethical guidance, right? And making decisions. If you think about the stuff that guy I was talking about earlier invests in, cannabis, you need some ethics there when it comes to how it's produced, how it's distributed, who it gets distributed to, and the laws that you have to navigate with that stuff. Mining, the mining industry and gold mining, especially depending on the country that you're operating, right? Those mining operations, there's all kinds of issues, especially if you look at mining that's occurring on the African continent. What was the other one? There's another one in there. Oh, yeah, porn. Yeah.
But I'm just saying, isn't that sort of laughable? They're saying we are the arbiters of making sure that these businesses are run at the utmost ethical levels because there's potential for abuse. Is that sort of what I'm seeing here?
Ministry of Truth, Department of Defense, be careful with innocuous names. And perhaps transparency and accountability will keep past, present, and future victims safe from this dirty, dirty industry. But as anybody on the internet can tell you, it is incredibly easy to find adult content online. Let's be honest, there are virtually no users online under the age of 18 who see a click yes or click no, I'm under 18, content warning. No one, that's not a turn back here moment for a lot of people. Pornhub.
Is it a legal defense though, Ben? I always wonder that. It's a cat, like you said, they clicked that they were 18, therefore we are absolved, of any underage quote users on our pages. It just seems laughable to me. Is it just anyway.
It is laughable. I mean, and as a result of all these factors we're describing, Pornhub in particular remains one of the world's most popular websites. Again, number 13 across the globe, over 8 billion people. Almost put it in the top 10.
150 million active users daily.
Mm-hmm. And those are unique users as well.
Yeah.
If you've been the target of non-consensual pornography or content like this, you are far from alone. As many as 1 in 25 people in the United States, just the U.S., have had a private image or video of themselves shared without their consent. It is statistically certain that some of us listening along tonight have unfortunate firsthand experience with this, and we do want to hear from you. There is a bit of good news, at least in the case of Pornhub. They have a templatized content removal form through which you can get specific videos removed from the site. But again, those are specific videos, and that is a legislative reaction, not a proactive move. So those videos, again, like these unfortunate innocent children, those videos keep cropping up. And,
think about Rachel's problem that we just talked about.
Think about Rose's problem. Those are very similar cases.
Well, yeah, but a 15-year-old who's now
a 14-year-old.
Yeah. Who has content on there that uploads to Pornhub, gets it removed, right? But they are not stopping the human being that has that content that uploaded it in the first place. That person can then turn around and upload it to any other site, because Pornhub started a trend of all of these other outlets.
We haven't really talked about this at all, and maybe this is, beside the point, but I will say I think there is something positive about user-owned and operated distribution methods, like something more resembling an OnlyFans situation, where individuals are putting up content at their own behest. They're the ones getting paid directly. They have users subscribing directly to them. It's also a lot harder for that stuff to get ripped and uploaded without these individuals' consent. A lot of them have, watermarks or whatever it might be, and there are easier methods for getting that stuff pulled down.
Unless they're being trafficked.
Oh, that's exactly right. I'm not saying any of this stuff is perfect, but I'm just saying there are, alternatives to this hive of scum and villainy model. And I think, Ben, you put it right here in the outline, and it's absolutely true. We are all very sex positive individuals and wouldn't begrudge anybody, agency of their own body and choosing to do this kind of stuff if it is, in fact, at their own behest and using it as a means of having comfort and income.
Yeah, we're not the arbiters of your personal preferences, so long as everyone involved is legally consenting, so long as no one is being harmed. But we have to understand, as long as there is this gargantuan, gigantic profit motive at play, these things will happen. Unclean things will occur. We also have to understand that humanity as a whole does not yet fully comprehend nor control what can happen online. And, if you're a casual observer, these may be nothing more than ephemeral, momentary pixels that you view on a screen. But those pixels, the acts have real world consequences, and time again, that seems to be something these companies and their owners do not want you to know. We talked a little bit off air. This may be the first part of a series, because I'm sure the three of us can agree there's a lot we did not get to.
We didn't talk about how it's changed the way we think, the way porn makes us think about sexual encounters and intimacy and like what that looks like. Well, I mean, really, just as humans, as humanity, this stuff has altered us fundamentally. And I'm not coming out against porn or something, because whatever, it's just, that's a whole other topic.
But it's also been evolving since the advent of the internet, like to the early points at the beginning of the episode, like technology, as long as there's been technology, someone's figured out how to do something horny with it. Like, you know, from the earliest cave paintings and drawings, people were drawing people in sexual, you know, situations. And speaking about the algorithm and the way it has created this kind of, I don't know, mind rot, I guess, as the kids call it, around content creation and around pornography and intimacy and just the way we see the world. This is a great opportunity. I just want to really quickly read a quote from Brian Eno, who's a thinker, technologist, music guy. He says, algorithms are not transparent. They're not like screwdrivers or something like that. They have a personality. They have a direction, and encoded into them is a worldview. And if the worldview encoded into them as a sort of libertarian, capitalist, individualistic worldview, that's where we will end up. And I'm not being dramatic in saying that we've seen it happen with social media. Social media could have run with different algorithms. It could have been a different world. And I think that applies to pornography as well.
Let us know your experiences, folks. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be safe and talk to us directly. We try to be easy to find online.
That's right. We exist at the handle Conspiracy Stuff on YouTube, where we have video content rolling out every single week. Very PG. And also on Facebook, and also on X, FKA Twitter. On Instagram and TikTok, we are Conspiracy Stuff Show. But wait, there's more.
Call 1-833-STDWYTK. When you call in, give yourself a cool nickname and let us know if we can use your name and message on the air. If you got more to say than can fit in that 3-minute voicemail, why not instead send us a good old-fashioned email? We are
the folks who read every single email we get. No character limit, no limit on the links you want to send us. Speak your mind, speak it true. The same rules from the voicemail apply as well. We keep your safety and anonymity paramount, folks. We are Conspiracy at iHeartRadio.com.
Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.